Over the weekend, the ADL decided to issue a tweet celebrating a dead pedophile and murderer. That individual's name, and I can show you that tweet, his name was Leo Frank. They tweeted this: "Tomorrow marks 109 years since Leo Frank was lynched by a hate-filled mob in Georgia after being falsely accused and unjustly convicted of murder in a trial marred by anti-Semitism." And they then lie and said that he was finally pardoned in 1986. And they lie only in that it signals to the public that he was not actually a pedophile, and he was not actually convicted for pedophilia and murder. The reality is that after 80 years of thuggery, the ADL got some governor in Atlanta to say, okay, well, we'll pardon him. Okay, so they're not saying that he's not guilty, but they're basically saying that he's not alive and he can't appeal the decision. This took 80 years of thuggery, but they refused to say that he was not guilty because the evidence was so overwhelming. And so I was so upset about this because it was a young Catholic girl that was murdered, Mary Fagan. And here is a picture of Mary Fagan. She was 13 years old. The power dynamic there was that Leo Frank was her boss. He ran the pencil factory that she worked at, and she was a low-wage employee. She was very poor, and all of the girls testified against him, said that he was super creepy, and he was unbelievably wealthy and related to banking families in America and overseas. And so I started speaking about this issue very frustrated at the fact that the ADL was actually born to defend a pedophile. Right? And this is the ADL that has a ton of power in our government. This is the ADL that is constantly tweeting at people, calling them anti-Semitic all the time. They launched their entire organization because previously to being the ADL, they were B'nai B'rith, which was a Freemason organization in America. And then they created the ADL to defend Leo Frank. This is a part of their legacy, and they can't get rid of it. And that is why people were going wild on Twitter when they had the audacity to tweet this and to pretend that this very guilty man was in fact not guilty.
The ADL, also known as the Anti-Defamation League. To tell the story of the Anti-Defamation League, we must first tell the story of the Ku Klux Klan. Why? Because they're connected. The story begins at the end of the Civil War. The Union North had won, and the Confederate South had lost. Southern cities burned to ashes by General Sherman helped deal a fatal blow to the South. And according to Jewish lawyer and researcher Robert M. Rosen, many Germans filled the ranks of the Confederate Army, joining the fight to keep the vestiges of slavery alive. And most of these Jews were Ashkenazi Jewish immigrants from Northern Germany. Their names recorded in the annals of history, with roughly 3,000 Jewish names recorded and cataloged as soldiers in the Confederate Army. The year 1865. and the bloody Civil War was coming to an end. With massive casualties mounting on both sides of the conflict, a Union victory was all but assured, and the freedom of the Negro was at hand. The long-awaited Emancipation Proclamation, which would loose the bonds of slavery, had finally come to the Southern Negro. However, not everyone was pleased with the newfound Negro freedom, which would lead to the Confederate soldiers founding the Ku Klux Klan. Which included Ashkenazi Jews. However, before we proceed, we need to remind our viewers that there were primarily two types of Jews that day: Ashkenazi Jews and Sephardic Jews. As the following reference reads, it reads, the Webster Dictionary definition of Ashkenazi: a member of one of the two great divisions of Jews comprising the Eastern European Yiddish-speaking Jews. First known use, 1828. So according to the Webster Dictionary, the first time the term Ashkenazi was used to refer to a Jew was in the year 1828. In fact, the word Ashkenaz itself, which is a Hebrew word, found in the Strong's Concordance, which is Strong's H813, that's Strong's H813, which can mean a descendant of Japheth, or the word Ashkenaz can mean of foreign origin, as described in the Strong's Concordance in the Blue Letter Bible Dictionary, which reads Ashkenaz, Strong's H813, root word etymology, of foreign origin. Or if you drop down below, Strong's definitions, Ashkenaz, of foreign origin. Or we can take a look at the King James Bible Dictionary, which reads Ashkenaz, word origin, of foreign origin. Strong's definition, a Japhethite, also his descendants. Or we can even find the definition in the King James Strong's Concordance, which reads Strong's number H813 means Ashkenaz, a son of Gomer, also his descendants in their land. Strong's Concordance, Ashkenaz, of foreign origin. You see, the root word of the word Ashkenaz literally means foreigner. And so, according to the Webster Dictionary, German Jews began to be called Ashkenazi Jews in 1828. And according to books published in the 1800s, they were described as white and pale-skinned Jews, while the Sephardic Jews, on the other hand, were described as black. As the following reference reads, it reads, the Spanish Jew is always dark complexion, and his hair is uniformly black, whilst the German Jew is often as fair as any German, and has light or red hair with blue eyes. And the next reference reads, and reads, into every country on the globe, this one people is marked with the colors of all: fair in Britain and Germany, brown in France and in Turkey, swarthy or black in Portugal and in Spain. And the next reference reads, and it reads, thus the black color is found not only in individuals as the black Jews of Portugal, but in tribes as the Becaris on the Red Sea, whose hair and character are perfectly Semitic. Let's review what we've learned so far. We began our lesson by restating the fact that many Ashkenazi Jews in the Confederate South joined the Confederate Army in support of keeping Negro slavery alive. In fact, Ashkenazi Jew Robert N. Rosen stated the following: A very few were planters. Some were descended from Sephardic Jews, whose ancestors had been expelled from Spain and Portugal in the year Columbus set sail for the Orient. Most Jewish Southerners, however, were Ashkenazi immigrants who in the 1840s and 1850s had fled Bavaria, Prussia, Alsace, Hesse, Baden, Swabia, Westphalia, Hungary, Posen, and Silesia in Prussian Poland and Russian Poland to America, the fabled land of freedom. Skipping ahead, thus overwhelmingly, almost unanimously, some with fear and trepidation, others with courage and enthusiasm, some with reservation, others with firm, unflinching resolve, Southern Jewry cast its lot with the Confederate States of America. Many like Ike Herman had found the land of Canaan. Others like Gustavus Poznański had found their Jerusalem, their Palestine. Still others like Marcus Baum, Jacob Samuels, Adolf Prosker, and Herschel Kemper had officially found their fatherland. Additionally, we find a cemetery created to honor the fallen Confederate Ashkenazi Jewish soldiers located in Richmond, Virginia, called the Hebrew Confederate Soldiers Cemetery. Estimates of Ashkenazi participation in the Confederacy vary depending on source. However, currently, Jewish researchers have cataloged and recorded roughly 3,000 Confederate Ashkenazi soldiers and counting. These names are found in multiple Ashkenazi Jewish databases, such as Jewish Gens, Jewish American U.S. Civil War Veterans Database, Ancestry.com, and the Chappelle roster. Now, some may attempt to minimize Ashkenazi participation in the Confederate Army by pointing out the relatively small numbers of Ashkenazi soldiers in the overall Confederate Army. However, whether those numbers are small or great, one thing cannot be denied is the significant impact that Ashkenazi had both in the war and eventually within the Ku Klux Klan. Judah P. Benjamin, arguably the most influential Jewish veteran of the Confederacy. Often called the brains of the Confederacy. It was said that the Confederate President Jefferson Davis didn't make a move without running it by Judah P. Benjamin first. You see, Judah P. Benjamin is often listed on paper as a Sephardic Jew because his mother, Rebecca Mendez, was said to be of a prominent Jewish family of Spanish descent. However, Rebecca Mendez's mother, on the other hand, was indeed an Ashkenazi Jew, which would make Judah P. Benjamin an Ashkenazi Jew. As the following reference reads, Benjamin's mother, Rebecca D. Mendez, claimed descent from one of the most prominent Jewish families of Spain, although her mother was of Ashkenazic ancestry. Now, Judah P. Benjamin was made the Secretary of War for the Confederate Army and later named the Secretary of State of the Confederacy by the Confederate President Jefferson Davis. And after the Confederate Army was defeated, former Confederate veterans founded and started the Ku Klux Klan. As the following reference reads, in Pulaski, Tennessee, a group of Confederate veterans convened to form a secret society that they christened the Ku Klux Klan. And the next reference reads, the infamous Ku Klux Klan was organized in May or early June of 1866 in a law office of Pulaski by 6 bored Confederate veterans. Once the KKK was formed, Judah P. Benjamin then provided horses, saddles, firearms, and other needed tools of terror for the Ku Klux Klan. His contribution helped form and sustain the Klan for years to come. As the following reference reads, Mr. Benjamin's interest in the Ku Klux Klan was so aroused that he borrowed money and gave it to Bishop Wilmer to buy horses, saddles, firearms, and other necessities for the Ku Klux Klan. Skipping ahead, Mr. Benjamin became very wealthy in England, and Mrs. Jefferson Davis told me that he often sent her money to relieve the needy among his friends in the United States, as well as the assistance rendered the Ku Klux Klan, as the South had been plundered, as to render this help necessary. So keep in mind, Judah P. Benjamin wasn't the only Ashkenazi supporting the KKK. Some supported the Ku Klux Klan by providing the long white robes of terror, while others joined the KKK outright. As the following reference reads, evidence of their father's convictions was uncovered one day by Baruch and Hardy in the family attic. Rummaging through a horsehair trunk, they turned up a Confederate uniform and beneath it, a white hood and a robe with a crimson cross. The regalia of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And the next reference reads, when the Klan marched in Houston in 1921, they wore robes and hoods bought from a Jewish manufacturer. Skipping ahead. And during a Dallas recruitment drive, Klansmen visited Edward Titch, the Jewish head of the Titch Gottner department store, to invite him to join. Titch was obliged to explain why he could not, to which a Klansman replied that it was a shame. Titch would have made a fine recruiter. And the next reference reads, Houstonians thought it was an old Klan comeback, and how they cheered. They did not know that William Joseph Simmons and E.Y. Clark, riding on their float ahead, were dreaming dreams of an empire of their own. They did not know that the robes used in the parade, or the Klan parade, were made in a Jewish overall factory of Houston for $1.50 each, whereas they were later made in Atlanta by a subsidized Gentile Protestant firm at $6.50 each net. As you can see, the Ashkenazi Jews were providing robes and other resources to the Ku Klux Klan during the time of Black Wall Street and the Red Summer, which involved massacres of Negroes and the burning of Negro communities across the country, carried out by the Ku Klux Klan. Waves of hatred against the so-called African American communities washed over the Negro many times over, especially during the early 1900s, when KKK-inspired white mob violence against Negroes in Tulsa, Oklahoma, aka Black Wall Street, or nationwide massacres in 1919, aka Red Summer, caused countless deaths of innocent so-called Negro families. And many of these Negro massacres were preceded by the establishment of the Ku Klux Klan, followed by an accusation of a crime or wrongdoing against the Negro, which served as the excuse for white mobs to commit heinous acts of violence against Negroes, which resulted in the mass Negro deaths across the country. As the following reference reads, NAACP, allegations behind lynching. White mobs often use dubious criminal accusations to justify lynchings. A common claim used to lynch black men was perceived sexual transgressions against white women. Charges of rape were routinely fabricated. These allegations were used to enforce segregation and advance stereotypes of black men as violent, hypersexual aggressors. Hundreds of black men were lynched based on accusations of other crimes, including murder, arson, robbery, and vagrancy. And the next reference reads, a lynch mob formed in downtown Tulsa after a 19-year-old black man was accused of assaulting a white woman. And the next reference reads, Washington, D.C., 1919. For weeks, police and the press, including the Washington Post, whipped up hysteria over an alleged Negro fiend attacking white women. Things boiled over on July 19th, 1919, with white posses hunting black men. This is why ADL President Jonathan Greenblatt's repeated false accusations against African Israelite communities are an existential threat to the peace and safety of every single person of color in the U.S. and abroad. Whether you're an Israelite, a Christian, or Muslim of color, historically, these types of false accusations are the prelude to violence against the black community.
So with all that said, there's a range of practice and observance. So there are plenty of black Jews who go to what you might call traditional Jewish synagogue. Then there are other communities like the black Hebrew Israelites. Now, there's a range of practice even among black Hebrew Israelites. You know, there's a large community of them in Israel who identify as Jewish in a traditional way. And then you have the guys in Times Square who observe in a way that's not so traditional, I would say.
They would say y'all aren't Jews. It would say that, what they say, white people are not the original Jews, basically.
Correct.
Yeah.
And look, they're entitled to their beliefs until that justifies shooting Jewish people with pellet guns on Staten Island. Or like, this is December. 3 years ago, December 2019, 2 black Hebrew Israelites went into a kosher supermarket in Jersey City and killed 3 people because they said they weren't real Jews.
Wow.
Shot them cold dead in a kosher supermarket.
There has been considerable reporting that these 2 suspects are linked to the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. We have evidence that both suspects expressed interest in this group, but we have not definitively established any formal links to that organization or to any other group. Based on the available evidence, we believe that the 2 shooters were acting on their own.
So when we talk about what is anti-Semitism, it's black Hebrew Israelites this weekend. What, today's Monday? Tuesday.
Wednesday. It's going to air on Wednesday.
Sorry. So it is over this past weekend in Staten Island on Sunday, a Jewish man who he must have been Orthodox because you could identify that he was Jewish, and his son were shot by a young man with a pellet gun as they came out of
BB guns. I did see that, yeah.
And so when he was asked by the police, they said it was a hate crime. He said, how could it be a hate crime if I'm a Hebrew?
And now for the truth. This is the picture of the man arrested and charged for the crime of which Jonathan Greenblatt implies was committed by a black man, a black Hebrew Israelite man. However, the person who committed the crime is called Jason Kish, which is a Jewish name, who is a white Caucasian male. You see, Jonathan Greenblatt's and the ADL's practice of making accusations against so-called Negroes goes back many, many years. In fact, the ADL was founded when the courts failed to convict a black man instead of convicting Ashkenazi Jew Leo Frank. And with that, let's take a closer look. April 26, 1913. It was the day of the Confederate Day celebration on the weathered streets of Atlanta, Georgia. Amid the hustle and bustle of this old city of the South, we find a 14-year-old Caucasian boy boarding a streetcar with his 13-year-old blue-eyed friend, Mary Fagan. The time was approximately 11:50, less than 30 minutes before the brutal murder of Mary Fagan. You see, Mary Fagan was on her way to pick up her paycheck from the National Pencil Company, located at 3741 South Forsyth Street in Atlanta, Georgia. Mary Fagan tells her friend George that she's afraid of her boss, Leo Frank, because he had flirted with her before in the past. And now she had to go and see him to pick up her paycheck. Well, George and Mary both got off the streetcar at approximately 12:07 near the pencil factory. And as they prepared to go their separate ways, Mary would tell George that she would see him later that day at 3 p.m. so that they could watch the Confederate Day parade together. However, little did they know that that was the last time that 14-year-old George Epps would see his friend Mary Fagan alive. Mary Fagan arrived at the National Pencil Company and walked through the front door on her way to Leo Frank's office on the second floor. Prosecutors traced Mary's steps as she walked up the stairs to the second floor to Leo Frank's office. And Leo Frank confirmed that he met little Mary Fagan during this time. And it's here that prosecutors theorized that Mary Fagan wanted to know if the shipment of sheet metal had come in, which she needed to do her job. So both Leo Frank and Mary Fagan walked to the back of the building where the sheet metal would be located on the second floor. Leo Frank's defense team tried to deny that he had gone to the back of the building at all. He stated that he had remained in his office the entire time. However, another employee, who also arrived shortly after Mary Fagan arrived, also came to pick up her paycheck. However, when she arrived at Leo Frank's desk, he wasn't there. And after waiting for a while, she left without her paycheck. Prosecutors theorized that Leo Franks wasn't in his office because he was in the back of the building on the second floor with little Mary Fagan. Where he attempted to rape the little 13-year-old girl. A struggle ensued. Mary would fall back and hit her head on one of the metal machines, knocking her unconscious. Prosecutors say Frank would go on to rape little Mary Fagan, then strangle her using a cord. Frank would then call a black worker who was on the first floor, Jim Conley, to explain what had happened, and to ask Jim to help him move little Mary Fagan's body to the elevator and then on to the basement floor, where Mary Fagan's body would be found later. And then poorly written notes stating that a Negro had killed Mary Fagan were placed near the body, presumably written by Jim Conley at the direction of Leo Frank, to place the blame on a Negro. However, there was one problem. The paper that the note was written on came from the second floor, near Leo Frank's office. The defense team would also state that the Niger Jim Conley murdered Mary and moved her body to the basement using a chute in the floor. However, the drag marks left by moving Mary Fagan's body didn't lead from the chute to where her body was found. The drag marks of her body led from the elevator to the place where her body rested, of which only Leo Frank had the keys. However, the defense team would try to state that Mary Fagan was murdered on the first floor by a Negro. However, the bloodstains were found on the second floor, the floor of Leo Frank's office. And also the cords used to strangle little Mary Fagan were also located on the second floor, near the bloodstain. Additionally, prosecutors brought forth 20 women, co-workers of Mary Fagan, who also testified of Leo Frank's advances towards them as well. Along with testimony of Mary Fagan's 14-year-old friend, George Epps, who testified that Mary Fagan told him that morning that she was afraid of Leo Frank. So prosecutors also brought testimony from Leo Frank's house cook, who testified to overhearing Leo Frank's wife and mother stating that Leo Frank had confessed committing the crime to them as well. This, along with many other pieces of evidence, made Leo Frank's conviction all but assured. And so Leo Frank, president of Benayah Brith, and his defense team exhibited some of the most racist, offensive remarks about blacks and Jim Conley during the trial. You see, to the defense team, this was simply a trial between two people, Leo Frank and, in their words, the dirty Niger. In fact, Leo Frank's team couldn't fathom how the word of a Niger could be taken over white Leo Frank. As the following reference reads,
the thing that arises in this case to fatigue my indignation is that men born of such parents should believe the statement of Conley against the statement of Frank. Who is Conley? Who was Conley as he used to be? And as you have seen him, he was a dirty, filthy, black, drunken, lying Niger. Black knows it. Starnes knows that. Chief Beavers knows it. Who was it that made this dirty Niger come up here looking so slick? Why didn't they let you see him as he was? They shaved him, washed him, and dressed him up. I was raised with Nigers and know something about them. I don't know them as well as the police, perhaps, for they know them like no one else. But I know something about them. There must have been a Niger in the crime who knew about it before Newt or anyone else. I'm afraid Newt knew. Yet, if he did, he was one of the most remarkable Nigers I ever saw, and I wish I had his nerve. There were things you detectives did to him for which you will never be forgiven. You persecuted the old Niger, and all you got was, "For God, I don't know." I don't believe he killed him, but I believe he knows more than he told.
You see, this marked the birth of the ADL. Shortly after Leo Frank was convicted by unanimous decision, August 25th, 1913, the ADL was formed by Leo Frank's Benayah Brith organization the following month in September. Benayah Brith President Leo Frank and his racist defense team would go on to appeal the court decision to the Georgia Supreme Court, then on to the U.S. Supreme Court. With both institutions upholding the lower court's decisions, seemingly based on the words of a lowly black man. And the question is, what did the ADL do about it? And with that, the fuse was lit. It was only a matter of time before the ordinances of hate were set off against the black community. You see, one of the first things the ADL did was get into the motion picture industry. They set themselves up as gatekeepers of what was and what wasn't allowed in motion picture films and plays. As the following reference reads, Anti-Defamation League. The league has been active principally in the motion picture field. And the next reference reads, Anti-Defamation League is drafting a bill to establish a board of censors to pass upon moving picture and theatrical productions in the district. And the next reference reads, under the Department of Theaters and Moving Pictures, investigation will be made of all plays which deal with the Jew. If after careful study it is apparent that a play gives an untrue or unfair portrayal, the league will endeavor to prevent its production in its offensive form, or if already staged, to secure the elimination of objectionable matter. Under the Department of Legislation, the league will endeavor to secure in the various states the enactment of statutes similar to the one recently passed in Ohio, providing for the appointment of a board of state censors. As you can see, one of the first objectives implemented by the ADL was to create a board of state censors to control the content of motion pictures and plays. And some of these boards actually made it into state law. And yes, this legal control of Hollywood is something the ADL denies to this very day.
So flash forward to today, anti-Semitism shows up in different ways, often like characterized by a series of myths or tropes. So for example, the Jews run Hollywood. Look, it is certainly true that there are a number of prominent Jewish people in Hollywood, in the entertainment industry. But the idea that the Jews run Hollywood is nuts. There's no cabal of Jews who are manipulating things, but the idea that Jews in power shows up over history.
The ADL successfully exercised its control over films just 1 year after it was formed. In 1914, it successfully suppressed a Mutual Film Corporation movie called Rebecca's Wedding. As the following reference reads, the league has been active principally in the motion picture field. Through its efforts, a keystone film entitled Rebecca's Wedding, distributed by the Mutual Film Corporation, was completely suppressed in practically every part of the country. In every state of the Union, some action was taken with relation to this film. This was written in April 3rd, 1914, just 1 year after the formation of the Anti-Defamation League. You see, the ADL successfully suppressed films by working directly with film producers and people running and managing theaters. As the following reference reads, stage defamation will be dealt with by enlisting the assistance and cooperation of producers and managers of theaters so that investigation of proposed performances may be made before the staging of the same, thus correcting evils before harm is done. And so, in 1914, the ADL worked with film producers and managers of theaters. One of which was a company by the name of Mutual Film Corporation, which owned a subsidiary called Reliance and Majestic Studios, whose owners worked with D.W. Griffith to produce arguably the most overtly racist film of all times. And ironically, this film portrays so-called Negroes as a bunch of dirty, filthy, lying ninjas, as described by the ADL's Benayah Breath president, Leo Frank defense team.
Filthy, black, drunken, lying ninja.
And the name of this racist movie was called Birth of a Nation. Okay, let's review what we've learned so far. We learned that the Ashkenazi in the Confederate South joined the Confederate Army and fought to keep slavery alive. And none more important than Ashkenazi Judah P. Benjamin referred to as the brains of the Confederate Army, and later named the Confederate Secretary of State. We then learned that after the fall of the Confederate South, many Confederate veterans then formed the Ku Klux Klan. We learned that Judah P. Benjamin became a key supporter and financer of the KKK by providing money, horses, guns, robes, and other needed supplies for the Klan. We also learned that Judah P. Benjamin wasn't the only supporter of the KKK. We also find Ashkenazi merchants providing many of the robes of the Klan across the South. We then learned that the ADL was birthed when Leo Frank, the president of Benayah, failed to convict a Negro for the crime of Leo Frank. We then learned that roughly a month after Leo Frank was convicted, the ADL was formed by Leo Frank's Benayah organization. Upon the founding of the ADL, it was set up as a censor for the motion picture industry through state censorship boards and other means. And once in place, the racist movie Birth of a Nation was created by the son of a Confederate colonel, D.W. Griffith. And it's here that many historians credit the blockbuster movie Birth of a Nation with the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan, which led to Negro massacres across the country. The year 1914, 1 year after the founding of the ADL. The filming of Birth of a Nation begins in secrecy in July, with directors taking 1,544 shots to create their masterpiece of darkness. The movie was later completed and premiered the following year in February of 1915 in Los Angeles. And despite the best attempts by the NAACP to ban the racist movie, the racist propaganda premiered amid protest and demonstrations. You see, the message of hatred was coming whether blacks liked it or not. And during the 1900s, we find that the message of hatred had many, many followers. Not only were white supremacists willing to support the movie, but if needed, help spread its infection around the world. Movie director D.W. Griffith, the son of a Confederate colonel, worked closely with white supremacist pastor Thomas Dixon Jr., who wrote the book The Klansman, which Birth of a Nation was based off of. The movie's glorification of the Klan portrayed hundreds of Klansmen wearing hooded robes, persecuting Negroes. Well, that's Negro characters played by mostly white actors painted in racist blackface. The Ku Klux Klan, who were hunting and murdering these Negro characters on the big screen, were wearing white hooded robes supplied by Ashkenazi Robert Goldstein, who also invested $3,000 of his own personal money to help bring the epic film of hate to a theater near you. Additional assistance was rendered by German cameraman Gottfried Wilhelm Bitzer, better known as Billy Bitzer, who filmed the entire movie using one camera. And not only did Billy film the entire movie, he too helped fund it by investing $7,000 of his own personal money to cover production costs. And once the movie was complete, various movie distributors helped disseminate the film to various theater syndicates, such as those owned by Ashkenazis Erlanger and Klaw or Schubert. One such distributor of this racist Birth of a Nation virus was none other than the Jewish founder of MGM Studios himself, Louis B. Mayer, which used this harbinger of black racism to jumpstart his filming enterprise and cash in. As the following reference reads, Juniverse from the Jewish Telegraphic Agency. This 1915 KKK-loving film built a Jewish movie empire. You might not think you've heard of the Russian-born Jewish motion picture magnate Louis B. Mayer, but if you've heard of MGM Studios, you have. Mayer, the second M in MGM, made his first fortune in an unsavory place from The Birth of a Nation, the controversial 1915 silent film that glorified the early history of the Ku Klux Klan. DFW's movie featured heroic portrayals of Klansmen and sexually aggressive, not very intelligent black men. It was based on The Klansman, a best-selling novel by a Southern Baptist minister who preached racial purity and championed Confederate rights. Hearing about the film's early buzz, Mayer telephoned Griffith from Boston and offered $50,000 for a 50-50 split, after covering his costs, for exclusive screening rights in New England. To twist the screws even further, Mayer raised the funds from mercantile Jewish investors. Birth of a Nation became the first $1 million blockbuster, and Mayer's gamble netted him a small fortune. He went on to produce Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz, and established the Academy Awards, and became the highest paid man in America for 9 years straight. They called him the Lion of Hollywood. And this Lion of Hollywood can be seen on the MGM Studios logo, baring his sharp teeth just before the opening of an MGM Studios film. However, if you take a closer look at the Lion of Hollywood, you'll notice that it rests upon what appears to be a racist character in blackface, identical to the blackface characters found in the KKK-loving film Birth of a Nation, which made MGM Studios its first financial fortune. As the following reference reads, Encyclopedia Britannica. The Birth of a Nation, landmark silent film released in 1915, that was the first blockbuster Hollywood hit. It was the longest and most profitable film then produced and the most artistically advanced film of its day. And the next reference reads, Smithsonian Magazine. D.W. Griffith's 1915 Birth of a Nation screened at the White House and enthusiastically received by President Wilson, glorified the Ku Klux Klan's white hooded terrorists as heroes, portraying the organization as saviors of the Southern white women during Reconstruction. The movie was a blockbuster and helped bring about a rebirth of the Klan, which grew from a few thousand members pre-released to an estimate 4 to 8 million by the mid-1920s. And the next reference reads, The History Channel, How the Birth of a Nation Revived the Ku Klux Klan. D.W. Griffith's controversial epic 1915 film about the Civil War and Reconstruction depicted the Ku Klux Klan as valiant saviors of a post-war South ravaged by northern carpetbeggars and freed black people. Shortly after the Los Angeles launch, Thomas Dixon Jr. convinced President Wilson to screen the movie inside the White House, arguably the first time that was ever done. President Wilson reportedly said of the film, "It is like riding history in lightning, and my only regret is that it is all so terribly true." Although the quote's authenticity has been disputed, there is no debate where Wilson stood on the issue of race. He resegregated the civil service, says McWan. It's not unreasonable to conclude that he thought the film was amazing. And of course, a movie screened at the White House was going to be perceived as an endorsement of the film. One white supremacist in Georgia understood this implicitly. William Joseph Simmons. is considered to be the founder of the 1915 modern Ku Klux Klan. While recovering from a car accident, the local preacher in Georgia followed the birth of a nation's nationwide success. There were KKK-inspired aprons, costumes, and regalia that glorified the defunct organization. Simmons seized on the film's popularity to bolster the Klan's appeal again. And so, on the day before Thanksgiving, on top of a granite mountain in Georgia, a deal was made with the devil. And the next reference reads, on Thanksgiving Eve, Simmons herded 15 fellow fraternalists onto a hired bus and drove them from Atlanta to nearby Stone Mountain. There, before a cross of pine boards, Simmons lit a match. And the Ku Klux Klan of the 20th century was reborn. Once resurrected, the Ku Klux Klan set its gaze upon the Negroes. And like the pale horse rider of the apocalypse, they were bringing hell with them. You see, it wasn't long after the Klan's return that nationwide massacres against the Negro began. As the following reference reads, on July 6, 1919, local newspapers reported the Klan rode into Montgomery County, just outside Washington, D.C., for the first time in 50 years. And only 12 days later, an incident provided the excuse for white mobs to kill Negroes in the streets in the Washington, D.C. massacre. As the following reference reads, in the July 18th incident that put the match to the tinder, 19-year-old Elise Stepnick was walking to her home on 9th Street Southwest from a job at the Bureau of Engraving, just a few blocks away, when two African American men allegedly collided with her and tried to steal her umbrella. The Evening Star reported her description of the colored assailants as a dark, short man and a taller man with a bumpy face. Stepnick claimed she staved them off until a carload of white men came to her aid. Other than her word, no evidence or report suggests anything more than an attempted pilfering, if it even occurred in the first place. More than 100 servicemen, after hours of heavy drinking, gathered outside the illicit taverns, brothels, and pool halls of the seedy neighborhood known as Murder Bay, today home to the federal buildings hugging Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest. Though not instituted nationwide yet, the district had already fallen under the lightly enforced spell of prohibition. Brandishing pipes, clubs, sticks, and pistols, the mob of veterans marched south across the mall to a poor black neighborhood, then known as Bloodfield. George Montgomery, a 55-year-old man, out buying produce, was the first to take a beating. The men soon spotted Rawls and his wife and began assaulting them until they broke free and ran home. For 4 days, Washington, D.C. became a battlefield with no real defense against the rampaging around the White House, the War Department, and the Capitol, and in predominantly black neighborhoods like LaDroit Park and Howard University, the U Street District, and the 7th Street Commercial Corridor, and even on random streets where unfortunate souls found themselves. That night, a black man named Lawrence Johnson was thrashed about the head by Marines wielding handkerchiefs filled with rocks, until that got tiring and a pipe was used to bash him bloody on the sidewalk just outside the White House. The Washington, D.C. massacre was just one of many massacres across the country. As membership of the KKK surged, so did the violence against the Negro. As the following reference reads, by 1920, some black Ocoee residents were driving nice cars and planning to send their kids to college. One of them, July Perry, had become a prominent businessman who would help broker land deals and arrange work for people. He also began registering black residents to vote. Skipping ahead, the test of acceptance came with the 1920 presidential election. Republican Warren Harding versus Democrat James Cox. The NAACP actively registered black voters throughout Florida. John Chaney, a white attorney and former judge running for U.S. Senate, strongly encouraged black residents in Orange County to exercise their right. I'm sure they were excited to vote, says Robert Hickey, whose grandfather John Hickey had grand plans for the 120 acres he owned in Ocoee. But an opposing force loomed. Chaney received a letter saying if any black residents attempted to vote, there will be serious trouble. The daughter of a prominent white Ocoee official would tell a researcher nearly 50 years later that 90% of all law enforcement officers, judges, public servants, and lawyers in Winter Garden and Ocoee were Klan members. A prominent Ocoee resident, July Perry, was beaten, shot, and lynched as a warning to other black citizens who dared to vote. He was one of 30 to 80 residents killed and whose homes were burned down during the Ocoee Massacre in 1920. One of the prominent or well-known massacres involves Black Wall Street. The scale, depth, and destruction in Tulsa, Oklahoma against a thriving, wealthy Negro community was shocking. And yet, just like the other massacres, we see the establishment of the Ku Klux Klan preceded the burning, pillaging, raping, stealing, murdering, and torturing of Tulsa, Oklahoma Negroes. As the following reference reads, Encyclopedia of Oklahoma History and Culture, Ku Klux Klan. Although the Ku Klux Klan did not officially invade Oklahoma until 1920, the organization's reputation preceded it by 50 years. Initially, the Klan had emerged from the confusion of Reconstruction in the Deep South. In the 1915 movie Birth of a Nation, D.W. Griffith characterized the KKK as the savior of the Reconstruction South from evil carpetbaggers and the stereotypical African American. So therefore, in the year 1920, the Ku Klux Klan was established in Oklahoma. And then less than 1 year later, in 1921, the Tulsa Massacre would begin. As you can see, the persecution of the Negro is directly tied to the rebirth and resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan. And the rebirth and rise of the Ku Klux Klan occurred in large part to the release of the blockbuster film Birth of a Nation, which was created through the efforts of multiple Ashkenazi contributors. Filmed and partially financed by Billy Bitzer. Wardrobe and finance provided by Robert Goldstein. Partially distributed by MGM's Louis B. Mayer. Shown in theaters managed by Erlanger, Claw, and Sherbert. And apparently approved by Benayah Brith's ADL, which established itself as the motion picture censor and gatekeeper. All occurring shortly after the racist Benayah Brith defense team believed Benayah Brith President Leo Frank was wrongly convicted by the words of a lowly Negro.
Yeah, I mean, so we've been using the pyramid of hate now for decades. It's a sociological model that looks at how hate can evolve and grow into something far worse if you don't interrupt it. I mean, this is basically our theory of change since the beginning. You literally have to interrupt intolerance before it mutates into something far worse. So basically the way that the model works, and we teach it, ADL is one of the largest providers of anti-hate content in the country. We reach kids in classrooms all over America, and we use the pyramid of hate. So at the bottom of the pyramid are biased attitudes, right? This is having bad feelings about someone, stereotyping, fear of differences, that type of thing. A level above that are acts of bias, right? So this could be non-inclusive language that alienates someone, microaggressions, maybe biased or belittling jokes that demean someone based on their race or religion, excluding someone because of their difference. So you have kind of biased attitudes that can then morph into acts that can then morph into systemic discrimination. And this is sort of like disparities in the criminal justice system or inequitable employment opportunities, where the bias becomes, again, systematized across a framework. And then the level up from that is bias-motivated violence, threats, desecration, arson, assault. And then above that is actual genocide. Actually, the act or the deliberate attempt to extinguish a people based on their difference. The deliberate attempt to extinguish a people based on their difference. The deliberate attempt to extinguish a people based on their difference.
The bloody assault of the Ku Klux Klan against the black community continued to rage through the 1920s like a wildfire through a paper mill. The Klan would stoke the flames and the Negro towns would burn. And while these fires of hate would rage, Ashkenazi founded film studios would further denigrate the Negro through blackface. Webster Dictionary, the definition of blackface. Dark makeup worn to mimic the appearance of a black person, and especially to mock or ridicule black people. Note, the wearing of blackface by white performers was from the early 19th through the mid 20th centuries, a prominent feature of minstrel shows, see minstrel, and similar forms of entertainment featuring exaggerated and inaccurate caricatures of black people. The use of blackface is considered deeply offensive.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will conclude this part of the entertainment with a brand new song sung here in Chicago for the first time on any stage by myself and company. You Camptown ladies sing this song. Do-da, do-da. You Camptown racetrack 5 miles long. Oh, do-da, day.
Webster Dictionary definition, minstrel, definition 3A. A member of a type of performance trope caricaturing black performers that originated in the U.S. in the early 19th century. Note, the acts of minstrels who typically perform in blackface featured exaggerated and inaccurate representations of black people in songs, dances, and comic relief. The popularity of minstrel shows in their heyday played a significant role in promoting negative racial stereotypes. Professional minstrel shows had fallen out of favor and effectively disappeared by the mid-20th century.
Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to the American Mammoth Minstrels, directed by Professor Cully. Tonight, it is our extreme pleasure to present many of your favorite minstrel performers.
Mr. Interlocutor!
Yes, Mr. Bones?
Our crave conversation with Mr. Tambo over there.
With Mr. Tambo, proceed, Mr. Bones.
Mr. Tambo, why pose you all scratching yourself?
Why, that's because I's the only one who knows where I itch.
Tell me, Mr. Tambo.
Yeah.
What is your first name?
Sufficient.
So who?
Sufficient.
Why, fool you, how come you all put that as first name, Tambo?
Well, sir, I was the 17th child in my family, and when I was born, my ma, she says, that's sufficient.
The Hollywood Reporter. For Jewish entertainers like Jolson, blackface was a way of becoming white, says Nick Salmon, author of Birth of an Industry, Blackface, Minstrelsy, and the Rise of an American Animation. It forced an alliance with the white Protestant majority. Jolson, known as the king of blackface, justified the practice by positioning himself as an ally of the black community. Note Salmon, he understood blackness and minstrelsy as interchangeable. For example, Jolson campaigned to have Warner Brothers produce an all blackface version of The Green Pastures, a 1936 movie depicting Bible stories told through the eyes of African American characters. The studio shot that idea down, and the pick remains only one of 6 feature films from Hollywood's Golden Studio era to feature an all African American cast. Animation, too, provided a fertile Hollywood breeding ground for blackface and racist stereotyping. Even a character as universally adored and seemingly innocuous as Mickey Mouse can trace his DNA back to the racist practice, argues Salmon. If you look at the way his face is made up, large painted mouth, painted eyes, white gloves, doing song and dance numbers, the plasticity of his body, that's all straight out of minstrelsy.
Ladies and gentlemen, you will now have the distinct honor of hearing the greatest voice in the world singing Come Where My Love Lies Dreaming. I now give you that golden-throated meadowlark, Mr. Tambo, Rex Allen. Rex Allen. That's me. May I have a keynote, please? Thank you. Come where my love lies dreaming, dreaming.
Whether it be from the Jewish king of blackface, Al Jolson, considered one of the greatest entertainers of his time, to the Jewish-founded MGM Studios, who helped distribute the KKK-loving film Birth of a Nation, Hollywood would continue to exploit the overt racism against Negroes using blackface films, such as the MGM Studios movie Babes in Arms, featuring Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland.
Like the honey from a bee, oh, I'm just wild about Harry, and he's just wild about me. Cannot do without, he's just wild about me.
I's just wild about Mandy, and Mandy's wild about me.
The origin of blackface minstrel shows date back to the transatlantic slave trade in the 1800s. As the following reference reads, Etymology of Minstrelsy, highlighted text, by 1843 in American English in reference to a class of singers of Negro melodies and delineators of plantation life. Usually white men in blackface, burnt cork, The act itself dates back to 1830, and ironically, the backdrop of one of Al Jolson's blackface performances can be seen taking place in front of a cotton field in an old slave shack.
I heard a robin this morning. I'm feeling happy today. I'm gonna put my cares in a whistle, blow them all away.
Icons of the transatlantic slave trade, which represent the greatest slavery, mass murder, persecution, and atrocity of any ethnic group on planet Earth. Keep in mind, these types of performances were occurring in parallel during a time of great massacres by the Ku Klux Klan against the Negro communities across the country. And unfortunately, this was a money-making opportunity for some in the Jewish community, aka the MGM Studios distribution of the KKK-loving film Birth of a Nation, credited with revitalizing the Ku Klux Klan, and Al Jolson's many blackface performances, to name a few. And with that, family, this concludes the first episode of Hidden Hebrews Black Apocalypse. See, many African Americans are well aware of the murders and persecutions committed against the Negro community by the Ku Klux Klan over the years. However, not many people are aware of the confirmed catalysts which led to the rebirth of the Klan in the early 1900s. Numerous scholars attribute the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s to a blockbuster movie released in 1915 called Birth of a Nation. And it's here we find the hidden hand of the Ashkenazi Jews who helped bring this message of hate to the big screen. Ashkenazi, such as Robert Goldstein, who supplied wardrobe and finances for the movie. German Billy Bitzer, who single-handedly filmed the entire movie, as well as provided finances for the film. Then we have Louis B. Mayer of MGM Studios, who helped distribute the film, as well as theater managers Erlanger, Klaw, and Schubert, who helped show the film in theaters across the country. And most importantly, at the heart of this firestorm, we find the newly formed Anti-Defamation League, which wasted little time making its mark in the motion picture industry. Less than a month after the conviction of Benayah Breath President Leo Frank, in August of 1913, the ADL was formed in September the following month. And by April of 1914, the following year, it was actively censoring films across the country. And most importantly, we find the ADL working with Mutual Film Corporation in April of 1914, which was the parent company who helped create Birth of a Nation, which started filming a few months later that same year in July. In other words, the ADL has some explaining to do to the black community, as well as owing major reparations. And so, family, Yah willing, we will bring you additional information regarding the black apocalypse of the ADL. And with that, fam, please like, subscribe, and share this video. And if you wish to support this platform, please donate through Cash App, PayPal, or Patreon, found in the description section. Your donations help bring this message to the world. And as always, thank you for those who continue to lift me and my family up in your thoughts and prayers. And Yah willing, we will reveal more shocking revelations about the black apocalypse in the days to come. Shalom.
That's not dramatic. Anti-Semitic, I'm Semitic too. Anti-Semitic, no, that's not Semitic. Anti-Semitic, no, that's not Semitic. Anti-Semitic, no, that's not Semitic. Anti-Semitic, I'm Semitic too. Anti-Semitic, no, that's not Semitic. Anti-Semitic, no, that's not Semitic. Anti-Semitic, and I'm Semitic too. Anti-Semitic, no, that's not Semitic. Anti-Semitic, no, that's not Semitic. Anti-Semitic, no, that's not Semitic. Anti-Semitic, and I'm Semitic too. Anti-Semitic, no, that's not Semitic. Anti-Semitic, no, that's not Semitic. Anti-Semitic, no, that's not Semitic. Anti-Semitic, I'm Semitic